Well, good morning, Northview. How are you guys doing this morning? It is so good to see you. Special hello to everybody joining us online. We're glad you guys could connect with us this morning as well. Guys, if you have a Bible with you or Bible app on your phone, Hebrews chapter 10 is where we're going to be today. We're continuing this conversation about some of the one another's that are in Scripture, these commands that God gave His church to say, man, if you could do this well, like your church and your relationships, not just with me, but with each other, are going to be so dynamic. The outside world is going to want to be a part of it. And so we've leaned in on these conversations over the last several weeks. And I think this one today is going to be a fun one. If I could paint a picture for what this one is going to be, it's about inviting you to be a hype man in the life of other people. Everybody needs a good hype man. You know what I'm talking about? I mean, someone who can encourage them, who can build them up, who can carry them along in their journey. The first image that comes to mind for me is sports, because, you know, that's what the first image to everything comes to my mind. But I got a chance to see it even just yesterday. Cameron had her first college basketball game of the season, and just what a dramatic difference one season to the next with the group of girls, and just how much better as a hype man the bench was compared to last year. It was just like night and day, and just everybody's cheering for everybody that's on the court. And we've always tried to teach our kids that, hey, look, when you're not on the field or on the court, like, that is your job. Like, get a drink, rest, yes, take a breath, but your job is to be a hype man for the people that are out there playing in that moment, because they need to hear your encouragement. They need to hear you firing them up. They will play better if you come alongside them on the journey. And you know, that's one of the things about sports that kind of teaches us about life and even faith. That is so true. That all of us at times need a pick-me-up. We need encouraged. We need somebody to come around us and encourage us to keep running the race that we're in. And I think this verse that we're going to read in Hebrews chapter 10 is that kind of a verse. It says this, it says, let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works, not neglecting to meet each other, to meet together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near. So this is the ultimate hype man passage in the Bible, and it comes from maybe the ultimate hype man book in the Bible. The book of Hebrews was a book written to believers, to the church, and its sole purpose was to convince and inspire them to keep running, keep going, don't quit, keep continuing on, don't give up, even if it's hard. Keep remembering what we have in Jesus. Here's what He's established. Here's what He's done. Don't forget it. Don't let life's worries hold you down. Keep going, keep going, keep going. It's the hype man book of the New Testament. And like a good hype man, the attention's not even on him. We don't even have 100% certainty who wrote this book. We know God wanted it in the Bible because the early church adopted it so quickly into the whole collection of scriptures. Some have said Paul, but there's been a lot of conversation about who it is. And I think that even more speaks to the idea of, it's not about me, it's about you, and let me help you in your race and in your journey. The command is, let us consider how to stir up one another. That's an interesting phrase, because sometimes when we think of stirring somebody up, we think negatively about that. Like, you all know what it's like to have somebody stir the pot, as we would say. You know people who you are in relationship. Maybe you work with them. Maybe they're in your home. Maybe they're in your family, and it's at reunions or dinner. Thanksgiving's coming up. And there's somebody in the group that loves to stir the pot. Right? We got an election coming up. Oh yeah, let's stir that thing up, right? You know there's some key things you can say, and it'll just spark a fire. It'll get everybody riled up and get them going. Sometimes, oftentimes, when we think about stirring something up, it's in a negative connotation. I got to be honest, this word that it comes from originally in the Greek is even one that typically is used for negative. It's from the Greek word paroxysmos. We get paroxysm from it, which is like a sudden violent convulsion that would happen. It's a medical term, not usually a positive thing when it happens. It was even used in the New Testament to describe a sharp, sudden disagreement between two people. Paul, the apostle, was in a disagreement with a guy named Barnabas over another guy named John Mark. John Mark had been on a missionary journey with the two of them. They had been planting churches. And somewhere on the journey, he quit. He abandoned them. He just left them. And it didn't sit well with Paul. And so when the second missionary journey opportunity came up, he said, he's not going with us. And Barnabas said, no, hold on. I think we could. And they argued over taking him with him on the journey. And the word that was used is the same word here as stir up one another. Only it was described and translated, they had a sharp disagreement. You ever had something where I'm not changing my viewpoint, you're not changing your viewpoint? That's the same word. And here's the thing. A lot of things in life are this way. Context matters. And in a good context, this is a good thing. In a bad context, this is a really bad thing. It's either suddenly getting good or suddenly getting bad. And in this context, it's good. And it's about stirring someone up, having the kind of effect on somebody else that their life in a positive way changes trajectory. Maybe their day changes trajectory because of the stirring that happens. What we just read says, let us consider how to stir up one another. That's what I want to do this morning. I want to share 3 ways that you and I can live out this verse to stir one another up towards love and good deeds, towards next steps in our faith, towards growth, all the while we are running our own race. First off, I'll say it this way. Consider the power of a stirring example. Consider the power that one life can have on another person's life, where when they see what that person is doing or what they seem to possess faith-wise, they go, I want that. I want to experience that. I want someone I want to be able to have that. There's a guy that I talked to in the lobby after last service who was at church today because something he saw in the life of a friend of his, a faith step that his friend took. And he said, that motivated me to take a step to come to church for the first time in forever today. That's the power of an example. That's a stirring example that helps somebody else take a step of faith. I'll come back to the guy we were just talking about, Barnabas. Barnabas. In the New Testament, Barnabas had that effect on people. He had an incredible effect through his personal devotion to God. His example helped other people take their steps of faith. First time we see him show up in Scripture is early in the book of Acts, which is the story of the first church being formed. We got several thousand people that become followers of Jesus right away. And within days, there's some leaders that are trying to figure out how do we put our arms around people, how do we shepherd them, and there were some physical needs that a lot of people had. And they were coming to these church leaders with these needs. And so there was a request for help, and Barnabas said, okay, look, I can help. I'll sell a piece of land. I've got this piece of land that I don't need, especially in light of the resurrection. When you understand that your sins have been paid for and your eternity has been secured, it makes you think very differently about this world and any kind of material, tangible things. So Barnabas said, yeah, I've got a field. I can sell it, and I'll just donate the resources that come from the sale, proceeds, to the church, and then it can meet all those needs. That example was an inspiration to the first followers to go, oh, that's a picture of what the change God makes in a person's life might look like in real life. And others followed suit in the same way. He was a ready partner in early missionary work. Some of the first journeys he's attached to, Barnabas is. And even going multiple locations. He helped lead a famine relief effort in Judea for some Christians. When the first church was persecuted in Jerusalem, it became unsafe to be a Christian in that area. And so they all had to leave. This is Acts chapter 8. You got the stoning of Stephen, who was a prominent leader in the early church. After he dies, everybody realizes, we got to get out of here. And so people go all kinds of different directions. And there was a group of them that went north to Antioch. And Antioch, over time, ends up becoming the new hub. What had previously been Jerusalem was the hub. Antioch becomes the new hub of Christian missionary journeys and everything. It was the center. It was the middle of it all. Barnabas was a part of that. Barnabas was a part of the group that did it. So he was an example of, like, I'll go wherever God's calling me to go, and I'll serve in whatever way he wants me to serve, and I'll trust that he's going to be behind us. When Paul caught wind of this growth that was happening at the church in Antioch, he said, I'm going to go check it out myself. He did. And Barnabas had the humility in that moment to say, you're a better leader and a better teacher. I'm going to take a step back. Even though I was here at the planting, I'll take a step back and you can be the point. You can run point here. Just example after example after example. But one of my favorites is this argument that he had with Paul over John Mark. They had this sharp disagreement. They had this difficulty. But one of the things that Barnabas had going for him, and one of the examples that he set for Paul, was Barnabas saw not just who people were, but he could see who they were becoming. And so he had this keen ability to see and look into people and go, I know that where you are is where you are, but this is where I see you going. So when John Mark bailed on him on that missionary journey, and he left, and then Paul said, on the next one, he's not coming, Barnabas said, no, hold on now. Hold on now. I think he could have extreme value to us. I think there's some stuff that he could do that nobody else could do. We don't want to, I know he made a mistake, but and they just couldn't figure it out. So Barnabas and Paul decided, you know what, we're just going to go in two different directions. We're both going to do kingdom work. We're going to go plant in different places. And Barnabas said, okay, and I'll take John Mark with me. And that's what they did until reuniting later in life. Let me ask you a question. You might know the answer to this. A little bit of a Bible question. What's the second book in the New Testament? You go Matthew, Mark. That's John Mark. That's the guy on the first missionary journey who bailed on Paul. The guy that Paul said, I'm not taking him with me. He's done. He'll never amount to anything. He'll never do anything for the kingdom. No, he's not coming with us. Barnabas said, I see something in this guy. He can come with me, and we'll go a different direction from you. Tradition holds that they went with Peter and went on church planting with him, and that the book of Mark is the preaching record of the Apostle Peter. None of it would even have, we wouldn't have that book in the Bible if Barnabas hadn't have said, I believe in this kid. I believe in applying grace right now in this moment, and let's walk it out, live it out, and I'll try to help show the world and the church for centuries, millennia, how to do reconciliation work. By the way, at the end of Paul's life, who did he ask for to come near to him? But Mark. And that relationship had been mended, and he was grateful for the service that he was able to provide, not just to the kingdom, but to him personally. A powerful story, a powerful moment of reconciliation. That's why I say his example was so big. What he did, even though he wasn't a primary character, was having a ripple effect in the early days of the church. I think it influenced Paul, like when he would write Romans chapter 1, verse 12, when he said, when we get together, I want to encourage you in your faith, but I also want to be encouraged by yours. There's something that happens when the people of God come together where our examples of faith overlap with each other. And even if we're not asking for it, we're seeing and rubbing shoulders, and we're experiencing where the example of faith that you live is helping me live my example and of authentic faith. And we do this when we come together on the weekends like this. We certainly do it when we meet in small groups in homes or restaurants or lobbies or wherever we're circling up. It's why we talk about this all the time, about being together, being together, being together. The big emphasis on this verse about how to stir each other up said, don't neglect to meet together, as some are in the habit of doing. And I know Christians forever many have read that for, as soon as they hear it, they're, don't preach to me about coming to church. You don't have to go to church to be a Christian. You can be a Christian and not go to church. It's like turns into a debate. And this is usually what I'll say. look, technically you're right. You don't have to go to church to be a Christian, just like you don't have to go home to be married. But it'll typically help if you do. It will typically have a major transformative effect on the relationship and on the dynamic if you do, right? So part of why this verse was written was there's a lot of Christians who are running their race alone. They run alone. And when you run alone, you get discouraged. You get broken down and tired. And part of life together is we stir each other up through example. Let me give you the second way we do this. Consider the power of a stirring encouragement. The way a spoken word of encouragement can change the trajectory of somebody's life. Because here's what happens for all of us in life. When life gets tiring or heavy or difficult or hard, like when the bills aren't getting paid, or when the health crisis hits, or somebody in the family goes crazy and relationships are sideways, whatever it may be. When that happens, we get discouraged. And discouragement is a thief. And it loves to steal your joy. It loves to steal your peace. It loves to steal your contentment, your energy, your headspace. That's what discouragement will do. Not only that, he'll invite all his rowdy friends to come over and join him. Discouragement loves to invite hopelessness over, and fatigue, and self-pity, and depression, and doubt, and bitterness. That's why it's against this backdrop that the people of God are told, encourage each other. Encourage each other. 1 Thessalonians 5:11 says, therefore encourage one another and build each other up, just as in fact you are doing. You are encouraging people. You are encouraging one another, but keep doing it. Don't stop. Keep doing it. I was reading that verse this week, and it made me think about a conversation that I have frequently with my wife. I'll say something like, hey, you look beautiful. And she'll go, thank you. You should say that more often. And I'll go, I do. And I think it all the time. And she's like, if you think it, you say it. Don't just think it and not verbalize it. You say it. And she just tells me, like, I feed off of that. Like, that's a big deal to me. Don't think you did it one time and you're good for the month. Like, I need more of that. It's the same thing with encouragement. Has there ever in the history of ever been someone who got too much encouragement? Is there a law against this? We act sometimes as if there is a law. That if we give out too much encouragement to other people, that we will somehow be handcuffed and thrown away forever. Because we don't seem to be very quick and frequent to give it out. Why do we do this? Why don't we say, well, how do I know that they needed encouragement? Well, let me just give you a perfect way to answer that question. Here's a test that you can apply to any situation to help you answer that question. Do they need encouragement? Do they not need encouragement? Here's the simple test. Are they breathing? If yes, then encourage. Everybody does. Everybody needs it. Everybody needs it. Even if you're doing it, do it more. Make it a discipline. Make it a part of your life. I got to be honest with you. If I can just kind of disclose my own world here a little bit, it's hard for me because I'm fairly self-focused most days. And I got my head down, and I even convince myself that I'm self-focused on things that are important. If you have that sick disease like I have, boy, there's a special place for all of us. We convince ourselves because what we're doing is so important, I have the right to be focused and ignore everybody else. To ignore things like encouraging other people. You might have to be like me and put alerts in your phone because you're not naturally an encourager that pop up that say, go be nice to somebody, jerk. Get your head out of your stuff and go take a walk and go find somebody to say something encouraging to. Now, here's the other thing. When it comes to encouragement, we can just be generally kind and nice to people, and that'll never be bad. But what this verse was getting to when it said to find ways to encourage one another was not just saying, hey, I like that haircut. Or your chocolate chip cookies are the best I've ever had, right? Or that homemade salsa was to die for. Who doesn't like getting those compliments? Those are great. Those are great. What this is really talking about is more like kind of spiritual encouragement, where you see in them or in their situation something that you can speak to that connects on a faith level. It might be like this. Hey, I see God in you when you serve like that. Or, I know you've been going through some hard stuff, and I don't even know the gist of what you're going through, but I just want you to know that I believe that God is doing a work in you as we speak, and that he's going to see this through to completion. I don't know how long it's going to take, but I believe in you and I believe in God. This is going to work itself in time out. It might be something where it's like, I want to assure you that God is in control. It might be something that's talking about the evidences of grace in somebody's life. I'll tell you a very practical one from my own life. When I was 18 years old, I had 3 people in a 2-week period, all independent of each other, encourage me to consider ministry as a career path. Nobody knew the other ones had had a conversation with me, and certainly no one knew that I was already thinking and praying about it, because I hadn't told anybody, not even my family. But 3 people spoke words of life into me in a moment where I was wondering, God, what do you want to do with my life? And the trajectory of my whole life was changed. There is power in the words that we speak. There's power in the encouragements that we can bring. Part of the reason God commanded for his people to be encouraging to one another is he knew how hard the world can get. Jesus said, take heart. He said, in this world you'll have trouble, but take heart because I've overcome the world. Take heart because what you experience now, it's going to get better eventually, which leads me to my third part of this conversation. When it comes to helping others take their next step and encouraging them to do so, consider the power of a stirring expectation where your words paint a vision for what the future could be. Because sometimes in the moment, the hardship is blinding people to that reality. Sometimes it feels like the time from now to there is going to be a long time. When I was in high school, I had a football coach that had a way with words. I mean, he had a way. He had some phrases and some things that he said that were so strange and weird and funny that we've never forgotten them all these years later. And a few of them I've just kind of adopted as my own over the years. But I had a coach that used to tell me that I was slow as Christmas. Rector, you are slow as Christmas. And he did this like 2 or 3 times. And I was always like, I don't know that I understand what he means when he says that. I think I do, but I don't know. And so finally, after one of the times he said it to me in a game, Rector, you're slow as Christmas. And I was like, Coach, what does that mean? And he goes, Christmas. When it takes forever to get there. You're a kid and you're waiting and you're waiting and you're waiting and it takes forever to get there. It's slow as Christmas. That's you. If you weren't slow as Christmas, you would have caught that ball. If you weren't slow as Christmas, you would have scored a touchdown. And so it has been forever this phrase that I have just adopted as my own, slow as Christmas. Because we all remember what that felt like. We all remember like that anticipation. I can remember, in fact, this week, Amazon sent a catalog to my house. Maybe to your house as well. It's just like the old Sears wish book, just showed up in the mail and you can start circling stuff and dog-earing pages. I was having a heyday just looking through this thing, right? I don't know if it's going to work, but I'm going to circle some stuff, right? I'm going to see what happens. But I can remember doing that as a kid and then starting the clock towards Christmas, and it felt like forever. It felt like forever, right? And you just would wait and wait and wait and wait and wait. But then year after year, this thing would happen. Even though the wait was tough, I'd had this demonstration of reality that had happened after the previous years where I knew, but it's coming. It's going to take a while. It might not be on my time schedule. I'd like to have stuff now, but I know that Christmas will come. It might feel like forever, but it is actually going to come because I've seen it happen in last year and 2 years ago and 3 years ago. It's going to happen. That's how the power of something out there expected that you know you can put your hope in changes the way you live your life. And so we're called to do this with each other and to help point people to the hope that we know is solid as a rock. We know solid as a rock. Can't shake it. Immovable. Because we need to do this because, let me ask these questions, maybe to help set this up. Is it possible to have too much hope in God? That's a weird question, but I'm just asking, is it? Can you put too much? Can you point too much or think too much about the hope that you have in God? Or maybe ask this question. Are there people that have too little hope in God? Well, yes. So we know the first answer is no, you can't have too much hope in God. And are there people that have too little hope in God? Yes. Well, this just sets this up. If it's impossible to have too much hope in God, and people always need more hope in God, then the encouragement to put hope in God and to speak into that hope for other people becomes more real. 2 Corinthians chapter 1, Paul talks about the power of expectation and trusting in God's promises and what he's going to do to deliver. How he brought that really came home for him in 2 Corinthians 1. He talks about a situation where he says, this was as bad as it got for me. And anytime a guy who's been shipwrecked, attempted, murdered, and imprisoned and tortured says, and this situation beat them all, well, we should probably pay attention to what he's about to say. He says in 2 Corinthians 1 that in this situation, we don't know a lot of what went into it, but he says it was worse than any other stuff. He says, we were under great pressure, far beyond our ability to endure, so that we despaired life itself. Indeed, we felt like we had received the sentence of death. He's speaking from his emotions in that. We felt like we were goners. We felt like it was over. Felt like we're on death row, dead man walking. That's a spot that many of us have found ourselves in. Maybe even are in right now. Maybe there's something in your life, maybe a health crisis has come up. Or an argument has broke out. Or financial worry has come up that has made you go, it feels like death to me. It feels like this is over. It feels like it's never going to turn around. If that's you, I want you to lean into these next verses. He says, indeed, we felt like we had received the sentence of death, but this happened that we might not rely on ourselves, but on God, who raises the dead. He's delivered us from such a deadly peril, and he will deliver us again. On him we've set our hope that he will continue to deliver us as you help us by your prayers. In other words, he's telling this church, look, we've gone through a situation where in our emotions and looking at the circumstances, we believed it was over. But God showed up and rescued us. And he's inviting people to live not in their emotions, not in the feels, because there's no foundation there, but to instead put your foundation in Christ, in what his finished work on the cross accomplished, where he took care of a believer's sin. He established an eternity forever. And to see that and understand that is the immovable rock that all the storms in life can come and do all they want to do. But that will never change. It will never change the fact and the promise that Jesus is coming back. So we encourage each other and we spur each other on to love and good deeds all the more because we see the day approaching. What did that verse mean? What is the day? The day Jesus comes back to set it all straight. We know that day's coming. He's already promised that he's coming, that he would come. We have the first coming of Jesus to establish that guarantee is now ours to hold on to. It's ours to realize. So we embrace our hope because our God is faithful and he keeps his promises. And as a people, with each other, we keep pointing one another to the expectation that we have in Jesus. That immovable rock, that bought and paid for future. Therefore, our hope is always completely and totally secure. Part of spurring one another on, stirring one another up, is helping each other keep our chin up in difficulties. It's also part of helping us understand that however good life is, there's even more coming. Keep your fork, because the best is yet to come. And it's that perspective, and it's that encouragement, and it's that life-giving word and influence that we have on each other that this verse was getting at, and that you and I can increasingly have participation in. So here's what I want you to consider today as a response. First of all, if you've never placed your faith personally in Jesus, this is how you build that foundation for life that is unshakable. You build it in Jesus himself and in a relationship with your Creator and Sustainer. Crying out to him to redeem you, to save you from your mess. And in that brokenness, he comes in. He picks up the pieces. He puts you back together, and he sets you on a firm foundation. And a new life path is put out in front of you. If you've never experienced that, if you want to talk to somebody or pray with you through that, as we sing this next song, I'll be standing in the back. I'd love to. After service, come by the Connect kiosk or scan this code that's on the screen. Take that next step to initiate relationship with somebody who can help you take that step. For the rest of us, let's make it a point, having been encouraged by what God has done in our life by sending Jesus to save us from our sin, to establish eternity in heaven forever with him. Let us then live with that glorious expectation out in front of us. And let us not become weary in doing good. Let us not become weary in encouraging one another by our example, by our words, and by our trust that our God is faithful and that he is going to keep every one of his promises. Will you stand with me? Will you join me in a word of prayer?